Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about OSINT, or Open Source Intelligence. This is the type of intelligence gathering that relies on publicly available information rather than classified or privileged sources. It's an absolutely critical tool for people like journalists, researchers, businesses, and even private individuals, and we're going to go over how the basics of all of it work. Before we dive in, let's define some key terms when we talk about open sources. We're referring to information that's publicly available and not restricted by things like copyright, licensing, or access controls. This can include things like social media, news articles, government documents, and even publicly accessible databases. On the other hand, intelligence refers to information that is collected, analyzed, and disseminated in a systematic and coherent manner. In the context of OSINT, this means talking about all of that open source information and turning it into something useful and actionable. So what are some common methods of gathering OSINT? One of the most basic and ubiquitous is simply using search engines like Google. It's definitely not rocket scientists. By entering specific keywords or phrases, you can find all sorts of relevant information on any topic, and we already do this by and large. However, it's important to keep in mind that search engines can only show you what's already been indexed. So, in other words, if you're looking for something really obscure or hard to find, you may need to use other methods. A common method is, reviewing social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All these platforms are full of user-generated content and can be a goldmine for finding out about people, organizations, and events. Just be sure to verify the accuracy of the information you find, as social media can also be a breeding ground for things like fake news, mis- or disinformation. One of the key skills in OSINT is the ability to find and access databases and other types of structured information. This can include things like government records, like with PACER, corporate filings, and even public records or real estate transactions, or criminal records. All these things are examples of things that you can capitalize on using OSINT. There are many tools and techniques that are out there for finding and accessing these types of databases, and we'll go over some of those, if not most of them, later on in other videos. Another key aspect of OSINT is the ability to use geolocation tools to find out where things are happening in the real world. This can be as simple as using Google Maps to find the location of a specific address, or as complex as using satellite imagery and other advanced tools to track the movements of people or vehicles. Now that we've covered some of the basic methods and tools of OSINT, let's talk about how to accurately use the information. One of the most common applications of OSINT is in the realm of journalism, where reporters use it to uncover stories and hold people accountable. For example, a journalist might use social media to capitalize on finding information, and search engines to find out about a company's business practices, or to use databases to track down financial records or lawsuits. Another common use of OSINT in the realm of business intelligence is companies can use it to keep track of their competitors and find out about new market trends or identify potential customers. This can be especially useful for small businesses that don't have a ton of resources to invest in more expensive intelligence gathering methods. Finally, OSINT can also be useful for individuals who want to find out more about a person or organization. For example, you might use social media and search engines to find out more about someone you're dating, or use a database to check the background of a potential business partner, babysitter, or employee. Of course, there are also many legal and ethical considerations when doing OSINT. It's important, I think, to respect people's privacy and, be mindful of any laws or regulations that might apply to the information that you're collecting. In many cases, it's also a good idea to verify the accuracy of any information that you find, as open source can sometimes contain mistakes or misinformation. So, how can you get started with OSINT? One of the most important things is to develop a clear idea of what you're trying to achieve and what information you'll need in order to achieve it. This will help you focus your efforts and use the most appropriate tools and techniques for the job, just like any other, form of, tackling an idea or topic. It's also a good idea to familiarize yourself with different types of open sources that are available and learn how to use the various tools and techniques for finding and accessing them. This might involve learning how to use specific search engines or databases, or learning how to use geolocation information tools to find out, things that are happening in the real world. Um, Finally, it's also important to be mindful of the legal and ethical considerations. I mentioned earlier, this might involve getting permission from people before collecting things like, personal identifiable information, or making sure that you're not violating any laws or regulations when you're doing these things. And, every state and county, typically has different laws and regulations. So you want to be up to date on that kind of stuff. I hope this overview of OSINT has been somewhat helpful and has given you a sense of, the many ways in which these powerful tools can be used, whether you're a journalist, a business owner, or just someone who, is curious and wants to find out more about the world around you. OSINT has a lot to offer. So, go out there and start gathering some intelligence. Thank you guys for watching. And make sure you hit the thumbs up button if you like this content and subscribe if you haven't already.